All right, let's jump right in. Right now, the world is going through its biggest geopolitical shakeup since the end of the Cold War. Old friendships between countries are getting strained, the global institutions we've relied on are looking weaker, and the world's biggest powers are all scrambling for position in a future that feels, well, really uncertain.
And with all of this instability, there's this one huge question that seems to be on everyone's mind. A question that honestly feels more real now than it has in decades. Are we actually getting close to a third world war?
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, let's just cut to the chase. The analysis here is serious, but it's not trying to sound the alarms for no reason. The bottom line is this. No, we are not in the final stages of a new world war, at least not yet. What we are in is a really dangerous transition period, and the single biggest risk we face? Miscalculation. Remember that word, it's going to be key.
So to really get a grip on how we ended up in this precarious spot, we first have to understand the world that's kind of falling apart around us. What was the foundation that kept things relatively peaceful for more than 70 years, and why is it crumbling now?
After World War II, global stability basically rested on these 5 pillars. First, you had the US as the undisputed top dog. Second, strong alliances. Think NATO. Third, this big push for open trade and globalization. Fourth, powerful groups like the UN to handle disputes. And finally, a shared set of rules for how countries should act. For a long time, this system more or less worked. But today, every single one of those pillars is shaking.
Let's start with pillar number 1, U.S. dominance. For decades, the U.S. was sort of the world's referee, enforcing the rules of the game. That's changing. It's not that America is suddenly weak, it's that its priorities have shifted. The focus isn't on managing the whole globe anymore. It's on acting more like a traditional great power, looking out for its own interests first.
Now, the second pillar, alliances, is really interesting because it's a total paradox. On paper, NATO looks stronger than ever. It's got more members, countries are spending more on defense, their forces are ready to go. But politically, it's a mess. It's fractured. Member countries can't agree on what the biggest threats are, and there's a lot of doubt about long-term commitments. That quiet division, that's a huge hidden danger.
And the third pillar, globalization, is also taking a hit. The whole idea was that if we're all trading with each other, if our economies are all tangled up, we're way less likely to go to war. Well, that theory is being put to the test. We're seeing this surge of nationalism and intense economic competition, and it's causing countries to kind of pull up the drawbridge and focus on themselves instead of the global system.
So what about the fourth pillar, the institutions designed to manage all this? Well, organizations like the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, even the European Union, they're really struggling. They're basically paralyzed by arguments from within, and their influence just isn't what it used to be. That makes them pretty ineffective when it comes to stopping conflicts or managing a big global crisis.
And that brings us to the fifth and final pillar, the rules themselves. The basic principles we all sort of took for granted, like you don't just invade another country and you try to solve problems with diplomacy, those are being thrown out the window. And when the fundamental rules of the game just don't apply anymore, the whole system becomes incredibly unstable. That's the takeaway here. With all 5 pillars crumbling, we're in a time of total systemic disorder.
So, if the old rulebook is gone, what are the new ones? Well, in this new, messy world, the major powers are all playing with brand new strategies. Let's take a look at what they're trying to do.
The United States, like we said, is making a big shift. It's moving away from trying to be the world's policeman and adopting something that looks a lot like a modern version of the old Monroe Doctrine. The main goals now are lock down its own neighborhood, the Western Hemisphere, make sure no single rival can dominate Asia, and frankly, ask Europe to handle more of its own security.
In this table just lays out the competing game plans perfectly. You can see the US is all about reprioritizing. China, on the other hand, is playing the long game, patiently building up its power, aiming to be the top dog in its region, and, critically, focused on reunifying with Taiwan. Then you have Russia, whose main goal is just to shake things up, to challenge the current world order, often with straight-up military force.
Now, a lot of people see Russia and China as this unified team, but it's way more complicated than that. As you can see here, it's really an alliance that's missing deep trust. Russia is working with China, for sure, but it's terrified of becoming the junior partner, and it's very nervous about China's growing influence. China, meanwhile, sees Russia as a handy tool, a useful but temporary way to push back against the West. It's a partnership of convenience, not one built on a shared vision.
Okay, so we've got a crumbling world order and major powers with clashing ambitions. This leads us to the most urgent question of all. Where is all this tension most likely to explode? Where could a local fight spark a global fire?
According to our sources, if World War III does start, there is one place that stands head and shoulders above all the others as the most likely trigger.
And that place is Taiwan. So why Taiwan? Because the stakes there are just astronomically high for everybody. For China's Communist Party, taking Taiwan is a core issue of national legitimacy. For the global economy, Taiwan controls the world's supply of advanced semiconductors, the tiny chips that are literally the lifeblood of everything modern. And for the United States, defending Taiwan has become the ultimate test of its credibility as a superpower.
Now you're probably thinking about other hotspots, right? What about Iran? And yeah, it's true, Iran is a huge destabilizing force in its region. The internal chaos there, from a collapsing economy and political crackdowns, definitely raises the risk of proxy wars and things escalating by accident. But the analysis concludes that while Iran adds a lot of fuel to the fire, it's probably not going to be the country that actually starts a global war.
So let's pull all these threads together and get to the final verdict. We've seen the old system fall apart, we've seen new power plays emerge, and we've pinpointed the most dangerous flashpoints. So does this mean a world war is inevitable? Are we living through 1939 all over again? The answer? Well, it's complicated.
This slide nails the push and pull we're living in. On one hand, there are some massive brakes on an all-out war. Nuclear weapons make a direct fight between big powers almost suicidal. Our economies are so intertwined that the cost would be beyond catastrophic for everyone. And unlike the 1930s, you don't have a big group of countries actively seeking a world war. But, on the other hand, all the dangerous ingredients are there. The rules are breaking down, rivalries are intense, everyone's building up their militaries, and we have no reliable way to manage a crisis if one pops up.
And this right here is maybe the most important takeaway of all. We are not in a 1939 situation, where one power is deliberately trying to conquer the world. Our time is much more like 1913, a world just packed with tension, with competing ambitions, and with this deep, deep uncertainty, where a small crisis in some corner of the world could accidentally spiral into a global catastrophe.
And that brings us full circle, right back to that key word, miscalculation. The real danger here isn't a specific country with an evil plan. The real risk is a mistake. History shows us that huge wars rarely start because leaders actually want them. They start because one side completely misunderstands the other's red lines, or because rigid alliances drag everyone into a fight, or because a small crisis just spins completely out of anyone's control.
So here's the bottom line. Is World War III possible? Yes. But is it inevitable? No. The old world is gone, and we're stuck in this long, dangerous transition. The decisive factor, the thing that will determine what happens next, is whether today's leaders can navigate this new era of competition without making a fatal miscalculation that tips us all over the edge. It's a heck of a question, and our generation is the one that's going to have to answer it.